As many longtime viewers will know, one of my favorite mods from the original Diablo 2 was called D2 Mod Maker, or more commonly, the Diablo 2 Randomizer, which in and of itself was a fairly varied piece of software, and as expected, this randomizer only worked well with the original game, so it was either play Lord of Destruction or miss out on it after the release of Resurrected. Well, earlier this year, the groundwork was laid by Mapron to create a new and frankly improved version of Mod Maker for Resurrected, now called D2 ModGen, and needless to say, I like the direction it's going, even though it's only in version 0.5. This randomizer packs many of the same interesting options as Talence's Diablo 2 Mod Maker, but builds upon them with more options for variety and more control as well. In each of these tabs, you'll find a lot more nuanced options than in the older versions, and it has modifiers both for regular Diablo 2 as well as Diablo 2 Resurrected. On the main screen, you'll find your basic settings options, where you'll set your mod ID to work with how Diablo 2 Resurrected handles mods with their sub-files and stuff like that, and sub-folders, sorry. Your file paths, launch options, seed, etc. are also here. It also has quick buttons for copying your vanilla D2R settings to the mod, as well as creating shortcuts or even setting the Battle.net launcher to default to launching this randomized mod. But below that, we get to the fun stuff. Things like the item randomizer, where we have the ability to select just how wild the item changes and modifiers can get, even so far as randomizing gem and rune bonuses, what various magic prefixes and suffixes do, and even to create additional versions of uniques, so you can get 20 gold daggers and they can all end up different. You can also even use this to remove knockback and flee as modifiers, or to introduce splash as a modifier if you know how to use the text box option, or even change plus skills to plus O skills so anyone can use them. As far as monsters, we actually have several tabs for them, with the monster randomizer basically giving you the monster spawn shuffles and increasing the spawn variety, kind of like you see in Act 5, while further down we can modify monster stats to make them more or less dangerous, and we can change monster density by multiplying the number of uniques and champion packs, or just by flooding it with a lot more monsters in general. My only wish on the density options was that there were higher default limits on it, but 20 is still pretty dense. You can also impact the monsters a bit by messing with the area levels and resistance penalties in the various difficulties using the challenge tab, even letting you push enemy levels well beyond level 85 or to restrict potion drops as you travel through the game. Another fun randomizer aspect in this though, and one not really touched on in Legacy, is the ability to modify your character's skills by shuffling a character's skills around so it modifies your path and skill choice options, as well as the ability to randomize your skill elements. Though on the skill element one, it does not update the tooltip, so you have to sort of test and guess to see which element your abilities have become, and if you want to ensure it's different from the original, there's a tab for that too. Now down in the make it easier section, you can do a little bit of making it easier, or you can actually make it a little bit harder on some of these, but the Horadric Cube one is absolutely just a make it easier path. But it's good for a randomizer since farming is completely different for, well, randomized drops, so you can experiment with different recipes much easier or more flexibly in terms of crafted items like blood, caster, safety, and hit power, as well as rune words. And it's a similar situation in the gambling screen with the ability to modify the unique rare set spawns in gambling and the chances for items to upgrade to exceptional or elite in case you want to do a randomizer gambling only run. Though it is worth noting the ability to gamble for charms still only works in Legacy and not D2R. On the character modifying screen, you can make things easier or harder as mentioned before, since you can adjust how many stats and skills you get per level, as well as skill caps and mercenary stats, and get started with some basic useful supplies. In quality of life, there are mostly capacity things, some repair costs, unlocking teleport, battle orders, etc., stuff like that in town, and you can even remove the unique charm restriction for those of you mad lads that want to use a dozen torches or something later on. Now in the item drop pod, you can adjust the rate of certain types of drops up, but you can also adjust things like junk drops, gold drops, equipment, etc., and even no drop to be a bonus or a detriment if you want. You can even flatline the unique variants if you want. Similarly, in the Rune Drop tab, you can tweak the drop rates of runes, or even swap some very oddly specific rune drop pools. It's a little bit weird, and yeah, it can make farming a little bit easier. Now, as far as the perfect rolls tab, it does pretty much what you'd expect it to do. It lets you force perfect rolls in a handful of contexts, from just always getting perfect defense on armor to always rolling perfect crafted item rolls. Requirements, as an aside, is actually more complex than it looks at first glance, since this is not only stat and level requirement points on it, but also you have the ability to adjust the Q level of items, which can make them drop earlier, and which can be good or bad. You can even change the level requirement for building skills, so what would normally be a level 30 skill, you can drop down to like a level 15. And finally, at the bottom, we have what is essentially a rudimentary loot filter that lets you hide specific items or make the names of a few items compact so that it's less cluttery on the screen. Though it is worth noting, hidden items still drop and can still be picked up, and then you have the pre-gen and post-gen data at the very bottom for using this alongside other mods, but I didn't mess around much with that. Now, as expected, you can find a link to this mod's GitHub in the description down below, and you can expect a playthrough on it in the near future over on the Let's Play Everything channel, though how far I set the variety will depend on my whim when I start. And as far as like any real technical issues, the one that I ran into is that on some installations of Windows, you'll want to make sure that your Diablo 2 Resurrected install is in the location where your system will allow ModMaker to write to it, since it needs to create files in the mod folder to allow it to run the changes you're doing to the game. This may mean changing the installation directory from what you usually have it on, which is program files by default, to something say like the games folder or something similar. And as always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and a special thanks to the regular viewers, channel members, and patrons that make this content possible.